welcome to the 6th episode of Breach of Etiquette, your L5R podcast. Today we're doing part 3 of our Emperor Edition retrospective, and our special guest is the lead designer for the L5R card game, Bryan Reese.
Hello, everybody.
Hey, Bryan, how's it going?
It's going pretty well.
Awesome. So, as listeners know, we've been sort of discussing the sort of most recent arc for Legend of the Five Rings Emperor Edition that is coming to a conclusion, or I guess has concluded. The storyline for Ivory Edition has begun with the Age of Ivory, which you can find on L5R.com. And as we learned today, Ivory Edition, the new base set, will see a limited release on March 10th to stores that ordered the special AEG retailer kit, and a wide release on March 24th. We are also aware that all of the Kote tournaments that will be occurring in March will be proxy legal. So for us, that means the Tulsa Kote, but you guys might want to check your Kote schedule and see what events that you'll be going to. So, Ivory Edition stuff out of the way. Let's get back to what I think some have called one of the most controversial arcs in L5R's history. It's no small secret that folks have been very impassioned during Emperor Edition. And so I wanted to start off our discussion by
introducing the rest of the people here.
That is a fair point, dude. I do things sometimes. So with me are Peter Meindertsma, John DiPietro, and Paul Bernard.
Yeah, so whatever. Bernard, thank you. I hate you. My rage, yes, of course.
So Celestial Edition had several issues with it during its run. It was the arc that had the most sort of banned and errated cards in the game's history. But despite that, it did something that very few, if any, arcs have done. The attendance for Celestial Edition events increased year on year. I ran events in the latter part of Celestial Edition, but because I'm a huge dork, I enjoy going on Jade Hand and comparing attendance numbers, and what I am, don't even. And
I was more going to take issue with enjoy, but no.
So I think that it is fair to say that Celestial Edition was a pretty great success. And so heading from sort of that environment into Emperor Edition, Bryan, what were kind of your goals with the arc?
Well, Celestial Edition was a really solid arc for us. It started off a bit rough because it was the introduction of Border Keep, and we didn't sort of properly understand how skipping ahead that one turn by introducing Border Keep, how that was going to speed up the environment. So while it started out a little bit rough, it quickly settled into its own. The Plague War environment, which was an expansion during Celestial, was the most balanced environment that L5R's had, at least since we've been statistically tracking it, as far as wins and placings and stuff, distribution of the clan. That was a record that lasted for one whole set until the next expansion came out. So Celestial was doing really well, and we wanted to more or less keep going on that. So we kept building on that with Emperor. The problem and if you remember, with Emperor, it was really popular. 2012 was one of the best years L5R's ever had. Unfortunately, what happened was, as we're all sort of aware of now, Emperor Edition definitely got out of control, and a series of different issues that we didn't foresee in the beginning started cropping up, and then there was just nothing that you could really do about it at a certain point other than damage control, which led into 2013, the second year of Emperor, which was not the best year L5R's ever had.
So how would you say that you're helping prevent that with Ivory Edition now?
Well, certainly, obviously, experiencing through it, you're able to identify a lot of the problems. What a lot of people I think don't quite understand, and I pointed out before, I'm not sure that everybody necessarily agrees, but the biggest problem that Emperor Edition probably had was the starting holdings. So eliminating the starting holding, and obviously the starting holding was something that had been around since partway through Gold Edition, but it was an issue ever since, and it just sort of gone on undetected until Emperor Edition, when it really made itself known. It made itself known in Lotus, but that's another story. But anyway, so getting rid of the starting holdings was a really big help. You can't. Can you imagine building a deck at Ivory now, where you only put, you put somewhere between 0 to 6 holdings in your deck? I mean, 6 was a lot for some decks. I mean, a lot of decks were just 0 to 3, like 0 or possibly 3 small farms, and that was it. And that's just not something that you can even really fathom in Ivory.
So Bryan, I think I'm the only one in our group who played through both Celestial and Emperor. Do you think the issue maybe wasn't necessarily the idea of starting holdings, but in specific Border Keep and Bamboo Harvester's XP? Because it seemed to me like, especially in the latter half of Emperor Edition, that no one was running the basic versions of those holdings anymore. It had all graduated to, I'm running Border Keep XP and something else. Yeah,
I mean, Border Keep experience, I wouldn't say as much with Bamboo experience, because certainly losing that turn was a legitimate decision, and there were still a healthy number of decks that chose to run the basic Bamboo. But certainly Border Keep experience exacerbated the issue. But no, I would definitely disagree and say that the issue was the starting holding. And I explained this on one of the design diaries, but I'll try to go over it quickly here too. Because what happens is, when you start with the holding in play, then you can build your entire deck off the fact that you're only ever going to have one holding, or if you're probably going to be going second, you'll have that second holding. And you can build your whole deck off that. Now, whether that's buying one big Berserker like the Crab Berserker Blitz did every turn and just make him really difficult to stop, or whether it was more like the Lion Blitz variant or some of the others where it was buying a few Boxables every turn. You didn't have to run any holdings to guarantee, and you were going to be able to buy 2 guys every turn. Now, take away the Border Keep and relive that same scenario. You're now, if you only have your Stronghold, you're only going to be able to buy 1 guy a turn, and 1 guy a turn is just even an Emperor Edition, we're simply not going to blitz enough. Like, if you want turn 1 guy, turn 2 swing for Province, that just wasn't going to be enough. Like, a mid-game deck would easily be able to stabilize against that. So you would have to include holdings into your deck. Well, you can't just include like 3 holdings and hope you get lucky and hit one. You're going to have to, you'd probably have to include somewhere around 9, 12, 15, somewhere in that ballpark, 12 give or take. That's 12 less deck slots that you had in your deck. And this is where the really sort of subtle issue with the starting holdings came into play, but a really important one. Those 12 deck slots in Emperor Edition were devoted to events that were really abusable. Events and sometimes regions too, such as the region that reduced the gold cost of an attachment. Colorado. But
I'm
these
familiar with it.
they would normally take up very important deck slots, events would. And they would also normally take up very important dynasty flips. But when you're only planning on buying 2 your dynasty cards a turn anyway, then you got 2 free dynasty flips. And when you don't have any holdings to run in your deck, you suddenly have 12 free deck slots that you can slap with things that like All That Will Be Lost. All That Will Be Lost was an incredibly powerful card in Lion, in Blitz, right? But we're talking about the Lion here, but in the Blitz deck, and saw almost 0 play anywhere else because it was really a fine event. But the thing is, when you had the dynasty slots you didn't really care about, or the dynasty flips, and then the deck slots that you didn't really care about, it suddenly became a really powerful. So no, it was definitely, while Border Keep experience made the situation worse, the situation would have still existed with Border Keep Basic, or even with Gifts and Favors, probably. just go fetch a holding from your deck. It was the fact that they had all these empty deck slots that they could free to put these events in.
So, as someone who top eighted the second chance with a deck that ran no personalities and instead ran a ton of events and celestials, I definitely can see that perspective, and I can agree. I just felt to me that in my playing of the game in Emperor Edition, the issue was not necessarily that power, but the consistency of seeing that power. And I always felt like you ran Border Keep XP because it enhanced the consistency of seeing what you needed to see more than any other single card in the game would.
Yeah, and that's where it exacerbated the issue. Undoubtedly, Border Keep experience exacerbated the issue.
It's sort of one of those cards where if a problem happens, it's going to spotlight that problem very quickly.
Yeah, but the point being, what I was saying is, if you had to rebuild that Lion Blitz deck, or any of the Blitz decks, just the Lion's the easiest one to pick on, but rebuild that Lion Blitz deck from Emperor Edition, any of the versions throughout the arc, but put it in an environment where you don't get a starting holding. Therefore, you have to put, in order to make sure that you flip enough guys that you can actually, threaten the Blitz. You're going to have to put, somewhere, like I said, between 9 to 15, somewhere probably in the range of 12 holdings in your deck. There's 12 less slots you can put towards these, all that will be lost, and harsh choices, and all these other events. And that's where the real power came in, right? Because it was, you go turn one, buy a couple Lions, and they're like, okay, well, turn one, I'll buy a Box Will Defend, and I'll buy a holding. And then they'd flip up all that will be lost. Like, oh, hey, look, I value, now I come swing for 2. And that, that would basically end the game. But you can't do that if you can't run starting holding. If you have to put 12 holdings into your deck, and then you have to run, somewhere around 22 guys or so, 22, 24 guys, that's only going to leave you 4 slots. You got a slot there for Celestial, and then, you're down to 3, maybe 4 slots in your deck. And you're not going to be able to, those Lion Blitz decks, and just the Blitz decks in general, they were running 10, 15 events just to deal with the problematic situations. All that will be lost, the too close to homes, the harsh choices, Topaz Champion, the Topaz event, etc. So those are just deck slots you don't have. Those are deck slots that are specifically granted to you because you had a starting holding that you just won't have in Ivory.
And that's certainly a fair point, and something that I would like to discuss later. But I think as much as we will be discussing sort of what happened in Emperor Edition, I do want to kind of start the discussion by sort of asking you, what went right in Emperor Edition? What do you feel went well? Was there anything that you were pleased with or anything like that?
So I think some people might not remember is that 2012 was actually the best year L5Rs had since Samurai, since I joined, which was basically end of Lotus. So things were starting out really well. It was a pretty solid dynamic environment. As we all know, it certainly tailed out of control. But it started out really strong. And a very common thread that I heard from a lot of people is Tier 2 of Emperor Edition is really fun. We just didn't have, I misjudged what it would take to properly design and playtest and all the resources that would be required. And this isn't a dig on playtesters. This is all my fault, undoubtedly. But, what it would take in order to get a balanced environment at the power level that I was looking at for Emperor Edition. So, the Tier 1 definitely tailed out of control and sort of went from one house fire to the next. But Tier 2 was a lot of fun. And I think there was a lot of fun decks and a lot of things that you could do in Emperor Edition.
That is one... Go ahead, sorry.
Oh, and it's taught us a lot. So Ivory Edition would not be as strong as it's going to be if it weren't for Emperor Edition. The same that Samurai wouldn't be as strong as it was if it wasn't for Lotus.
So, Peter, John, Paul, you guys played Emperor Edition. You didn't sort of go to all the Kote events and Gen Con and whatnot, but what did you guys think of
And I enjoyed it a lot, mainly because I was raised in L5R on Tales of the only environment is breeder. So I really enjoyed just having a bunch of different options, and it's like, oh, would I like to play honor this and that and such and so forth. I was going to ask you if there was any theme from a clan that you thought really just worked the way you wanted to work, and you were glad that people were having fun with it, and it sort of played out the way you thought it was going to.
You being me?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, there was a few. I really enjoyed Yusuke. I felt.
Oh my god!
Rage buttons. Hit the rage buttons. Just hit them all.
That's the telltale side of something done right when it's so polarizing. Best characters we've ever had. But I really enjoyed Yusuke. Love it or hate it, I felt that they got the economic warfare off stuff pretty well. Pay this gold or be punished. Pay this gold or be punished. Pay this gold or be punished. And sometimes be punished for paying the gold.
I guess what I saw was them spending gold and negating my turn.
I know that people got to call them forest spirits, and they actually had some pretty good successes throughout Emperor. Or they started calling them Pokemon, but I really like the forest spirits. Like I like Ranger and Druid stuff, and when you're playing role playing things, so I really like Kitsune. I thought the flavor of them came out pretty well too. And there's plenty more, but those are just the two that popped in my head. Tamori. You know what? Tamori is another one. Like again, it was probably it was tier 2. I don't think it ever had any great successes, but it was a lot of fun when you get down to 2 or 1 provinces and you'd be sitting on 18 on or something like that. And your opponent's like, oh wow, this is getting easy. I'm just gonna come over and cakewalk you. And then finally you got that super unit built up that they could contributed to force wall bound and they couldn't kill. They couldn't kill like 3 times because of that spell. And then you just bowed out their entire army, won the battle resolution, and gained 26 honor. Whatever.
Oh god, I know exactly which spell you're talking about too.
I had built Tamoria a couple of different times, and people ran into it. And if you went to battle, it was pretty fun.
Yeah, it was weird. And it didn't work out, and it didn't wind up being top tier. And obviously, the goal of it wasn't to lose 3 provinces before you hit 20 honor. But it did sometimes take a while to set that up. But it felt fun to play an honor deck that actually wanted to go to battle and then punished you when you got to battle and made you overconfident about yourself, which was sort of a cool Tamori thing.
I think for me, because when I started, started playing Phoenix, and I was playing Inquisitor Honor, and I'm not. There were times when I wasn't playing it right, but I kind of like that particular deck because it felt very much like a very good beginner deck without being too beginner, because it let me get used to the game, and it didn't force me to have to make as many tactical decisions as, say, a heavy military deck would.
Sure. Yeah, I can see that.
So for me, I didn't win as many games as some of the other decks I played against won, but I think it was a very good deck to start with, and it was very accessible and helped get me into the game a lot.
Honor can be a good place to start because learning when to attack, when not to attack, how many units to send, etc. That's a skill that isn't particularly easy. It's not, a lot of times Magic is just all right. Well, I just send everyone, and you don't like. It's not obviously always that way, but it can be a really strategic decision. And sending 1 unit too many can be the difference of life or death.
Or 1 unit too few, as I found out yesterday, actually.
Yep, exactly.
I still find it funny that my Dishonor deck won by honor once.
I'm still. I don't remember who built it, but the deck that just won by every single thing was like, oh, you're gonna block this, and I'm gonna win this other thing.
Yasuki every switch.
That thing.
I think it top 8'd the Australian Kote in 2012, and is still. I think the best deck list I have ever seen posted for L5R, because the sheer insanity of it was awesome to just witness. That isn't a deck you played against, you just kind of saw it and went, wow, that is really cool.
So I didn't hear about that deck, but I'm gonna guess that it's a guy named Slug.
It's an Australian player. I think it got posted on like ostel5r.com after their Cote. I saw it and it apparently according to myth and legend, it won.
Gather round, children.
It
Hear
won
the
by
tale.
every win condition during the Cote. At least one game. It dropped all 5 rings. It honored. It took 4 provinces. It dishonored.
Yep, that's definitely Slug.
Well, Slug, if you're taking a listen, that was
Congratulations.
yeah, that deck was amazing. And I kept trying to get a local crab to build it, and they never would. Cowards. So, Peter, you came in. I want to say, I think
Very tail end.
very talented, but you had like a pretty cool ninja deck. If
Well, for the longest time, I was trying to get the Magistrate Dishonor to work. And I got it probably about maybe 60 to 70% efficiency, but I never really got to complete it. And then, yeah, I made a ninja deck on top of that, which was working, which worked pretty well for the most part. Whenever, I didn't make mistakes, not reading what the card actually did.
I still have to do RTFC a bunch of times. I mean,
they sell the card sleeves now. It's
I
very
know
handy.
they sell the card sleeves, and I apparently need to read them because there were a couple of games with the Shiba dueling deck I was having. That was like, if I read the card, I'd actually realize that I won that day.
I do remember one of those incidents against my deck where Kudo is fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, like I'm going like with Ivory Edition right now. I'm trying to get the same stuff. The military magistrate dishonor stuff, since that seems to be the most viable right now as far as it goes. Because I mean, the courtier stuff works, but I'm not. I've only like really encountered it twice so far, so I'm not really sure how much better it works.
You need to talk with John Napick because his passive Scorpion Dishonor is terrifying.
Oh, I know how it worked in Emperor Edition, and yes, it was terrifying.
So, I really do think that kind of the tier 1 for Emperor was very degenerative due to a lot of, in my opinion, what really kind of broke it open was a limited phase kill. There was quite a lot of it going around. That's why I quit the second chance at Gen Con this past year. The first, I think, 2 decks I ran up against were Chi Kill, and I was like, I don't even want to play this game anymore. So I want to spend some time, rather than talking about kind of what went wrong, because I think that's an easy discussion to have. I think the better question is what could have gone better. Sort of like the introduction of things like overconfident and brash, or kind of the sub mechanics for various themes and factions, like the Agasha Foundries. They had that really nifty stronghold and the guy who interacted with it, but then it kind of just stayed with those 2 cards.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think you brought up a couple good examples. I mean, Gasha Foundries. It'd be interesting to actually see Gasha Foundries in Ivory. I think that could be an interesting deck. I mean, the problem with Gasha Foundries was it never gave you that increased hand size, which was sort of its goal. Because your actual hand size got to be so small. And yeah, I mean, when we were doing the introduction, when we started introducing keywords with abilities, I think now looking back, we can see that that there's not necessarily an issue with making mechanics for keywords. We've seen quite a few successful ones in a row now with Reserve, with Discipline, with Karmic, with Destined, Expendable, etc. But certainly it was unpopular when it first came out because it was the Overconfident and the Brash. And then we got into Elite and Stalwart after that. And I don't necessarily think that Overconfident and Brash are inherently bad keywords. I think they probably weren't costed properly, because obviously they reduced your cost, right? Mm-hmm. And I think Emperor was the wrong environment to introduce them into. Fate cards and just cards in general were so swingy that your personality had to be really amazing, which I think probably only that one Mantis guy was that had the naval range too, in order to make the brass worth it. And then overconfident, you had the free Crane and the free Phoenix. I think they might have been the only overconfident people to see play. I don't remember.
And I think there are only, I want to say 2 or 3 Stalwart cards printed, which is fairly surprising.
Yeah, so we introduced the Stalwart keyword, and then we started our work on Ivory Edition. And we decided that we didn't want to carry over those keywords into Ivory. I mean, they got introduced in Honor and Treachery, which was shortly before Torn Asunder. Mm-hmm. So, it was only basically in existence for one expansion. And then we decided, actually, we weren't positive at first whether we wanted it back in Ivory. So we were leaving, we intentionally left it out of Coil so we could make up our mind later. And then the decision was to not bring it back in Emperor Edition. In Ivory Edition. And so, yeah, you didn't see much of Stalwart. Elite, I thought, was a cool keyword, but it was just too powerful. To be completely immune to bowing effects was it just proved to be too strong.
Yeah, I definitely don't think Elite would work in Ivory, considering that half the actions in Ivory right now are bow actions.
I'd be okay with some lines getting Elite. That'd be fine. That's cool.
No. You're like negating. You would negate all of like what Spider does.
And right, that's kind of what ended up happening was when you have Stalwart and Elite coming out, you then say, well, I could bow your Momoku no Oni, but it doesn't do anything. Mm-hmm. And I'm just kind of sitting over here and I've blown an action or a card. And so it was one of those things where it kind of puts combat into a corner where combat then became eliminating presence rather than kind of sort of dealing with it. So,
well, are there any Emperor keywords that you would like to see back in Ivory Edition that aren't in there yet?
How about just old keywords in general, like double chi?
I actually did give thought about bringing double chi back. Yes. When you got someone like Makoto or Doji Hattori, does it really matter if they have double chi? Like, I honestly was looking at bringing double chi back to be used very rarely, just to really show off that these guys are, the top duelists in the Empire, right? Mm-hmm. If Noritoshi at his 7 chi duelist, this is going back to Celestial for Manji, but
I loved Noritoshi. Loved that dude.
If he'd had double chi, or if Hojatsu had double chi, it really wouldn't have made any difference. Mm-hmm. But it does do well to highlight. Now, I mean, the counter argument there is that what's the point of making a keyword for 2, 3, 4, maybe 4 people at tops. There was which is why we ultimately didn't bring it back. But it was something that we were looking at.
There was a great joke when Noritoshi was previewed for, I forget what set in Celestial that was, but someone was like, he has remembered the ancient and forbidden art of double chi. That version of Noritoshi sold me on the Crane so hard you don't even.
Noritoshi was a lot of fun. Yeah, that's right, because he did double the first focus.
Yeah, he had double chi for a card, and he was like 7 chi with a battle lethal duel and 4 honor.
He was pretty good.
I'd run him in Ivory. Yeah, that's fair. So what can kind of we've kind of seen the Ivory base set now. Some of us have been playing with it for a while. Some of us are just now getting into seeing where all the themes are. Obviously, our group has been pretty active. We've been building a lot of decks. So where with the upcoming expansion, has that actually been named yet? I think it was in a magazine, but I can't remember. Anyway, so
we certainly we have names for all the expansions. I don't know if it's public yet. I don't know if we've released it publicly yet, but I mean, it does have a name.
You could do it now.
I could do it now. I would be worried about spoiling any potential story stuff.
Which is fair. So, but what, and I've asked this of all of our guests so far, what do you think players can look forward to in Ivory Edition? What is the kind of thing that really excites you about where the game's going?
So Ivory's done a good job of getting to its roots, and taking a lot of what's worked well in the past and putting it together in one package. If you go back to some of the earlier parts of the game, and like, for example, take Gold Edition, which is not remembered terribly fondly by those of us who lived through it, but had some really good elements to it. It was really accessible.
I like how you almost use that description like it was a catastrophe of some sort.
Well, those of us who lived through it, like, we don't remember Gold Edition terribly fondly. But it's important to be able to separate out why that is. And the reason why we don't remember it terribly fondly was because it was a very stagnant environment. Like, I'm not sure. I won the Gen Con of the last Gold Edition tournament. And I think it was more or less the end of Gold Edition. There was one expansion that came out shortly
That
there.
was when like all the diamond dual bugs had hit, and from what I understand, that kind of broke a lot of things.
Diamond started out it started out really rocky, got some errata, and then it was okay. But I mean, so to give you an example with the Gold Edition, so I won the last one, so it was the third Gen Con of Gold Edition. It had been out, there's tons of expansions out, and roughly about 80% of my deck was Gold Edition base, or Spirit Wars, which was the one expansion leading into it. So that means in 9 or 10 expansions, I'd picked up, what's that, like 15 cards or so total between both decks. Maybe 8 cards per deck, different from when the environment. So it was really stagnant, but it was really accessible. There were a lot of good things about it. Now you take Lotus Edition and Emperor Edition, which are considered which are not remembered fondly for the complete opposite reason, for too powerful and didn't like these other things. But they had a lot more battle interaction with it. Back in the days, for all of you youngsters, well, you play some of the older stuff now, so you're probably familiar with cards like Deadly Grounds or whatever. Battles were not as exciting as they are now. Like, you would try to have more force, and then you would sneak attack Deadly Ground to just try to end the battle. Mm-hmm. Well, much since Lotus, well, sort of since Diamond, but since like Lotus and beyond, we've brought battle actions into a lot. So it's sort of merging the very interesting and back and forth great stuff that you get about battle actions in recent arcs, but making it a lot more accessible, like the game used to be. And a lot easier for new players to get into. I also really I don't think that force has ever mattered probably as much as it does now. Maybe with the exception of when the game first came out. But because so many of the actions are scale based on your force, and look at your force, so much of it is the kill, and now for the first time the bow actions all pretty much scale on your force. Mm-hmm. That the force actually matters in a way it never has before, and I really like that aspect of it. It's no longer just an on-off switch about whether you have an attachment.
So there's one thing that I did notice with the Ivory Edition base, and I kind of wanted to bring up because it was fairly surprising, especially coming from sort of Coils of Madness and Gates of Chaos and Aftermath. But in the Ivory Edition base set, there are, I think, 18 or so unique cards, the clan champions and the clan armors. And then, as far as I could tell, like, none of the rares in the slot are unique, and there are, in fact, no unique personalities in the set besides the clan champions. Is that sort of something that's going to be happening in the future, or is that kind of like a base set only kind of thing?
So if you were to ask me what my least favorite keyword of all time is, it would be unique. I've hated uniques for a while. And the reason for it is it's not a good keyword at any level. What I mean by this is, you as the player, me as, when I play, like, I hate losing to uniques, right? Like, it really bugs me when my opponent, like, we've had a good battle or whatever, go back and forth, and then we both sort of lost some resources, whatever. Maybe I'm in a good position, and they play their game of dice. Fantastic, right? You favor cycled, or you counting house to draw one card, you drew into your game of dice, you drew your unique. Yeah, good job. It can be an incredibly frustrating experience. Certainly opening uniques in packs is a really annoying experience. Like, nobody likes it when they're opening up their packs and they open up the 7th copy of a unique card. Uniques have almost zero value on the secondary market. You can't trade them away because nobody wants them. You can't sell them. You only need one yourself, so it's sort of like throwing booster packs away. And certainly on the sales side of it, distributors, us as the manufacturer, and the retail stores hate unique as well, because that's less cards that you as the player now has to collect. Right? I mean, if you figure if you have 50 rares in a set, if you wanted to go ahead and collect all of them, a full play set, there's 150 rares that you need to collect. Well, let's say half of those are unique. So instead of 150, it's actually, what would that bring it down? It's not going to bring it down by half, but it'll bring it down to like 100 cards or whatever, right? So that's a significant decrease in what you have to collect. So basically, on all levels, the unique keyword is bad. The only place where it is really good is it does help tell the storyline, and there are some other applications where it has good value and where it's still going to be needed. Right, really important people. Like I don't want to see 3 clan champions running around. I think we would lose enough of the story there that I don't want to see that. But we are severely restricting it to the best of our abilities. It's just not a good keyword. I mean, simply put.
Would you consider going to like singular instead of unique, just so that it only whenever shows up on the field, but you want
So you mean
three
making
cop?
sort of unique work like singular used to, because singular is gone.
Yeah.
With,
Right.
Killing unique and sticking with singular. Well, with Ivory Edition, I killed the singular keyword.
Yeah.
I don't know if you noticed, but Counting House used to have the singular keyword.
Now
and
has
now
the trait. Yeah.
now has that text written out. So I'm not a huge fan of singular. It is better than unique in my opinion. But there was only one card in all of Ivory Edition that was singular, and that was Counting House. So I figure, why have a keyword for one card? That's it. So that does work up until it's a card that doesn't enter play. Right? Like you couldn't have a singular strategy card, or at least not singular as we currently know it. And like I said, unique does have some legitimate applications. And I don't think the story would be as strong if clan champions were singular instead of unique. So that was something that we looked at. And the idea's got a lot of merits to it, but ultimately we decided to go ahead and stick with unique, but just keep it on a minimal number of cards.
So has there one of the things that really excites me about Ivory Edition beyond the game is that we're moving to this kind of new tournament format where the game is going to be supporting limited play very strongly. And as a lot of folks know, I'm a big fan of draft in general, and I really enjoyed Emperor Draft. Emperor Base Draft is so far the best draft I've done for the game. I really like that we're going to this sort of strict format, so it'll be a bit easier for new players to kind of get something like a competitive deck together without having to compete with 18 months or a year's worth of cards that might be harder for them to get to. But the big thing that really surprised me was the sort of announcement of supporting this Emperor and Ivory combined legality. And on the forums recently, there's been a big upsurge in discussion about Legacy as a format in general. So do you think there's a possibility that we might see like a full-on Legacy tournament at Gen Con, or maybe allowing Legacy as a format for things like Winter Court in the future?
Yeah, it's possible. I wouldn't rule it out. I think my just personal opinion is that Big Deck is better than Legacy. I mean, the last time I played Legacy, well, not the last time, but one of the last times I played Legacy, 3 or 4 games straight, my opponent gained 52 honor on turn 2. And it was 3 or 4 games straight because one of those games I actually won. And that was sort of the dumbness of it. The cards have changed now, so I don't know if that combo is still around, but I'm sure there's more cards now. This was back during Celestial time period, so you have all of Emperor to add into that now. I'm sure there's even dumber combos. I wouldn't see like some of these alternate formats as being off the table for sure. Legacy included in that. I think Legacy is a lot of fun until somebody shows up with the tournament deck.
It's been my experience that a format like that, I've played a lot of Magic. I played a lot of Versus when they introduced their Legacy format. And the thing that's sort of been consistent to me about a Legacy format is that it requires a very strong hand in terms of restrictions and bans and erratas to make the format not sort of totally degenerative. And even then with stuff like, for those who might be familiar, Magic doesn't have what we would consider a legacy format where sort of everything is legal, except for what they call, I believe it's vintage. And vintage is power 9, everything goes, craziness, and there's, I think, one vintage tournament a year because I think someone priced out a tournament deck in vintage and it was north of $30,000.
Considering that you can now get that Black Lotuses are going for even more than that, I'm not shocked.
Well, that was apparently a collector's market, $35,000 Black Lotus.
You weren't going to be playing with the card. You were just going to sit there and let it look pretty. That's all you were going to do with it.
That's always been my biggest objection to almost every single time I've seen a Legacy tournament is that if you don't really go for proxies, it's who has the biggest wallet wins the tournament, which doesn't really feel very fun.
Yeah, I mean, you certainly get that in Magic, where Magic is a money game. We have a few things going for us there in L5R, where you can pick up a Legacy deck. Even some of the most expensive older cards cap out at maybe $10 to $15 a piece, and there we're talking things like Evil Portents. So you don't need a $5,000 Black Lotus to play in it.
It's one of those things that I would really like to see sort of come back, not only because I think there's a lot of attachment, even as someone who came new into the game. There were the big flashback cards in Celestial Edition's second release, so I got to see like Egg of Panku and Deadly Ground and these cards that I hadn't seen before, and I was really surprised at the response Legacy has been getting on the forums, because for a very long time it seemed to me like the majority opinion was Legacy is terribly broken, we can't ever unbreak it. And I think with Big Deck maybe sort of signaling that kind of shift, that people are reconsidering that opinion. And it's one of those it can be very fun if people are willing to kind of go the extra effort to make sure it isn't completely broken, if that makes any sense.
No, absolutely. I would love to see it, right? I mean, this is going back to my childhood. I get very nostalgic when I look at these old cards. And as you mentioned, for newer players, playing with these old cards that, they've read about the characters in the story, like Yoritomo or whoever, or, they've heard about stories of these cards when they were played from some of the older players in their group. I think it'd be awesome. I would love to. It takes a lot of resources for Legacy in order to get that going. It's just resources that are better. They're better spent, and I'm sorry, Legacy guys, but are better spent trying to do other things.
Well, even Big Deck has its own council that kind of runs all of its stuff, right?
Yeah, and I think that's why Big Deck is sort of taken off, because when you run the cost-benefit ratio of Legacy, it takes a lot and a lot and a lot of work if you want to try to get that balance. Every time you think that you have it, there's going to be 10 new decks that spring up that are just going to be just as busted as the ones you just banned in a Legacy. But Big Deck, due to its natural deck restrictions, automatically weeds out a lot of that. And they certainly have come in and had to ban a few things. But the cost-benefit ratio there is much, much, much more favorable for Big Deck than it is for Legacy. So it wouldn't surprise me to see Big Deck continue to grow and grow. And we love it. I mean, I personally love it. I played. It was the only event that I played in it this Gen Con, which was big.
I'm just remembering. I when you're saying about playing legacy cards, I mean, like I said, when we introduced this thing, I've only ever played in Emperor as like a thing, but I still remember one of my favorite games of L5R was when I played the big deck Shiba thing that I just threw together. This Phoenix thing that I just threw together was having Shiba and then the card that says you can reincarnate onto anybody. So it's like my opponent spent 4 cards murdering Shiba, and then I'm like, and he respawns.
Yeah, Shiba has a tendency to do that.
I definitely think my favorite big deck game was Yoritomo steals 3 provinces because Yoritomo takes them. They're his now.
Yep. Yoritomo so much fun. He's not loyal. I played him all the time in here.
There is a
he's a capitalist.
there's a fairly big deck presence, and the biggest blocker for us is that, or at least that I've seen, is that a lot of players don't want to print out 200 proxies. So
Or can't afford to print out 200 proxies.
At that point, you're just buying the cards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How much ink is this going to be versus what I can pay for this guy on eBay?
I do want to give a special shout out to Doc Angst and Yasuki Jeremy and the other L5R shops online that do sell legacy stuff. When I was building, I went out and purpose bought everything I needed for a Mantis deck because I really wanted to run every version of Yoritomo. And they were super handy, and it's definitely shops like them that can make things like Big Deck and Legacy more of a format for even younger or inexperienced players to get into than something like getting into Modern and Magic.
Oh yeah, I mean Modern Magic. It's I enjoy Magic. I don't want to talk bad about it, but it's
But this is an L5R podcast.
yeah, I do enjoy it. Like, I'm not going to slander. I do enjoy Magic, but yeah, I mean, I don't know the whole name of the card, but that Goif card. I mean, those are what, 200 apiece.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, yeah.
That doesn't even get into like Cryptic Command and stuff like that.
Oh god.
Which is a 4 mana counter a spell and do something else, or just draw 4 cards, whatever. It's fine. So, one last thing I do want to kind of bring up with Ivory Edition is I really like the classic feel of the rings coming back. For those who maybe haven't taken a look, I do enjoy going on Oracle and just reading cards. The thing that got me into Legend of the Five Rings, the story that made me interested in the game as a whole, was there's this wizard poll that went out in I believe it was like 97 or 98, and the poll was, what is the most broken card ever printed for any card game? And the card that won, number 1 with the bullet, was Ring of the Void for Imperial Edition L5R. And I didn't actually see the card until just a few years ago. And its ability was you could only play it if you had no other cards in your hand, and then it would draw 5 cards whenever you had no cards in your hand. And since I've been playing, Ring of the Void was play 4 actions, put it into play, and then open, draw a card. But with Ivory Edition, we're really getting back to that classic.
Yeah, because now it's discard your hand.
Now you have to discard your hand to put Void into play. Now, for Ring of Water, you have to destroy terrain, which is a classic thing Water used to do.
Fire is back to dueling.
Well, fire's always been weird. So Brian, was there to kind of wrap things up and to get us onto the topic no one ever talks about, which is enlightenment? What was the decision like to sort of take rings back to this classic feel?
Well, I mean, we were trying to take a lot of back to the classic feel. The strongholds, for those of us who are immersed in the story, the stronghold name like Kasatan Shiro or Halls of the Damned, or these mean something to us, but they mean jack squat to somebody who's picking up the game. And it's like, okay, Kasatan Shiro, what does that mean? So it's the Crane Palace. Okay. So the stronghold names are, Exquisite Palace of the Crane, blah, blah, blah of the clan, blah, blah, blah of the clan. Everything that we were doing on all levels, not just the mechanics, but everything, we're trying to get back to a much more accessible much more classic feel. And so we were trying for that for the rings too. And oddly enough, the only one that had basically been the same throughout the game's entire history, we changed the play condition. But so, we went back. I didn't like the Ring of Earth as it came out in Emperor Edition, because Earth, that's not what Earth should be about. Earth should be about stopping things from being destroyed. Not moving, not doing this stuff. It shouldn't be about destroying stuff like Earth was.
Well, you had, the earthquake, magic or whatever that you could do, but hey.
Fire has sort of bounced back and forth. It's mostly been about dueling. Emperor took it away from dueling, because in Celestial, it was dueling, but Celestial dueling was a little bit different. And so, we wanted to take it back to dueling and more or less force Enlightenment decks to try to rely on tricks in order to try to get out. The trick that they seem to have come up with is Nakaru.
Yeah.
He is a good trick.
Yeah, which that works. At one point, it wound up not making the cut, but we had the Kiho Double Chi, which, if you guys aren't familiar with it, it was a Kiho that your monk or Shigenja bowed to cast, and then it gave you Double Chi for that duel. So you could run, it was only a one focus value itself, and you could run lower focus values in your deck, and then, you just have to go with all these sort of combo-y tricks in order to try to get it out. And I've seen Enlightenment decks actually running focus, again, just because their focus values aren't necessarily particularly great, but just to try to get it out. So, the fire we wanted to bring back to the dueling. The reason why we went away from the dueling is we wanted to avoid decks that were, you had no choice but to run nothing but 4 focus value cards in your Enlightenment deck in Celestial. But I think we have some more tricks that's not necessarily the case for Ivory Edition. Void, we wanted Void sort of put itself into play the last couple arcs as you were doing other things. You were going for water and you're taking your 4 battle actions. Like, oh yeah, coincidentally, Void came out.
Yeah.
And we wanted to go back to classic feel. So at one point, it was actually back to this is the last card in your hand. But then, certainly for Enlightenment decks, it was it was still the same ability. The ability basically stayed the same from when we conceptualized Ivory Edition. But it was pretty difficult for Enlightenment decks, and it did make it more difficult to actually get into play. So we wound up settling, and I'm actually pretty happy where it is. Where you can play it anytime you want, assuming that you don't already have 3 rings in play. You can play it anytime you want. It's just going to cost you your hand. I do like where that's wound up. With Air, we wanted to. Air was the only thing that tied the Enlightenment deck inherently to either monks or Shigenjas. And we felt that any samurai should be able to search for Enlightenment. Even though that's always been tied to Shigenjas, and then when monks started making an appearance in the game, monks, we didn't quite think that was right, because any samurai should be able to try to achieve Enlightenment. So that's why we tried to go a different angle. We went with a completely different angle for Air than anything else, right? So that's why Air is the only one that actually deals with politics and doing favor actions. And we tried to hit on all these different spheres for the different rings. So when you actually play an Enlightenment deck, it's much more of this combo. Can I get my combo off before the clock runs out deck? And then to finish out the last one is Water. Water, we actually just went back to the classic edition. And with how terrains are these days, it's sort of funny how it's now that terrains destroy other terrains when they come into play. So you want to be last one in, not first one in. They actually naturally lend itself towards Water being one that you can play. Which, back in the old days. Back in the old days, you couldn't discard the rings for their abilities. So, decks didn't run rings, basically. Unless you were cheating them into play, or it was essential for your deck, like Ring of the Void was. You basically didn't run rings. But yeah, so we went back to the classic play condition because it actually sort of just naturally fit well with what we were doing in other parts of the game.
And I can tell you, at least as far as our group strategy, it's it's been very fun to see the new rings. And Earth has made it into a lot of decks because Improper Papers was a very good card.
Yeah.
Earth is really good, and Dragon that starts with Earth, that either plays the Elemental Adroitness and or the Kata that does the same thing. Really annoying when you're on your deck. I was playing against my friend's Enlightenment deck.
I've seen some cards that
Actually, he came out to the Austin Kotai last year. And he started out with Earth, and he played Find Your Center.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I'm playing Crane Dueling Honor, and he's like, all right, I'll bring in Nakaru, and I'll swing. I'm like, oh, fantastic. It's 2 send homes, and I can't duel you. And he's like, oh, you know what? Before I swing, I'll put on detachment. I'm like, all right, now those entrenched positions will go to the back of the game.
All right. Well, I definitely think that as many problems as Emperor Edition faced, there's definitely a lot of excitement heading into Ivory Edition. We've certainly been seeing a lot of players coming into the game. The new Learn to Play set, Matter of Honor, has definitely helped out. And I think that all in all, things are looking pretty good for L5R for now.
Yeah, we're Emperor Edition was a big slap in the face. And it's it's easy to point at the design side of things, and I take full culpability for that. But Emperor Edition failed. AEG failed Emperor Edition on basically all levels, and it was a big slap in the face to us. And so we've really, really worked on figuring out what the hell happened and how to do that at every level of the game. So I'm really happy with the potential for Ivory Edition.
Well, Bryan, I understand you've got a meeting pretty soon, so we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you very much for joining us on Breach of Etiquette, and I hope to see you at Gen Con this year.
Yeah, absolutely.
All
Likewise.
Right. Well, thanks everybody for listening. This wraps up our Emperor Edition retrospective, so you can take a listen to Fred Wan, Adrian Burton, and Bryan Reese as they discuss what I think is one of the most interesting arcs in L5R's history. And I think it's time for us to sign off. So, oots!
Banzai!